In the early 1990s, in the quiet Swiss city of Bern, there lived a modest teenager named Pak Un. He studied at a private school, played basketball on the court, collected Air Max sneakers, and knew all of Michael Jordan's tricks by heart. He loved skiing, visiting Disneyland, spoke fluent German and English, a typical kid of the Western 90s. Only his neighbors and classmates had no idea. This cheerful fan of American culture was the heir to one of the most secretive dynasties in the world. When he returned home, Pak Un once again became Kim Jong-un, and just a couple of decades later, the world would already see his name as a synonym for nuclear tests, missile threats, and political prisoners. How did a boy who once dreamed of sneakers and Disneyland end up at the head of a state under constant sanctions, total isolation, and sometimes unable to feed its own people, yet capable of creating nuclear weapons? 75 years ago, North Korean forces launched a war, invading the South and capturing about 90% of South Korea's territory. The U.S. and UN forces pushed back the offensive, after which China and the USSR intervened on the side of North Korea, and the front froze along the 38th parallel. Two Koreas appeared on the map. During these battles, American aviation nearly wiped Pyongyang off the map. Around 200,000 bombs were dropped on the capital. In 1953, an armistice was signed, and two states appeared on the map, North and South Korea. The South was supported by the U.S. with money, technology, and military protection, while the North relied on China and the Soviet Union. Since then, North Korea has been ruled by the Kim dynasty, first Kim Il-sung, then Kim Jong-il, and now Kim Jong-un. After the war, Kim Il-sung turned his military past into the foundation of his personal power. He proclaimed the armistice of victory and held a parade among the ruins of the capital. With Soviet and Chinese aid, he rebuilt the country faster than South Korea, built new cities, and at the same time eliminated his political rivals inside the country. Propaganda transformed him from a military commander into the son of the nation, while his care for war orphans became a tool of his personality cult. Kim portrayed himself as both the father and mother of the nation, building schools and orphanages, instilling in children the idea that their true parent was the leader. The Mangyongdae School produced future elites of the army and security services, providing the dynasty with a loyal base. At the same time, Kim strengthened national security. The American bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki convinced him that allies might not always come to the rescue, and he concluded that the only guarantee of survival was his own weapons. With Soviet support, North Korean scientists trained in Dubna. A Soviet reactor was built in Yongbyon, and the military budget rose from 4 to 5% in 1956 to 30% by the mid-1960s. To the people, this looked like the care of a savior who won the war, fed the country, and protected it from another strike. In the 1990s, North Korea was struck by a devastating crisis. Kim Il-sung, the nation's founder and symbol of the regime, died. Almost simultaneously, the Soviet Union collapsed, stripping Pyongyang of its main financial and food donor. The disappearance of its key sponsor, combined with harsh sanctions from the US, Japan, and South Korea, the end of Soviet supplies, and devastating droughts and floods brought the economy to its knees. With less than 20% of the land arable, agriculture became unsustainable. Machinery stood idle, fertilizers couldn't be imported, and food shortages reached catastrophic levels. The country entered the worst famine in its history. Estimates of the dead range from 300,000 to 3.5 million over 4 years. Power passed to Kim Il-sung's son, Kim Jong-il, who not only preserved the dynasty, but also used the crisis as the cement of a new system. Even enemies, the US, the UN, and South Korea, were forced to send humanitarian aid. Inside the country, the government, to avoid complete collapse, did the unthinkable. It allowed limited private trade. State factories lay idle, men continued showing up for work only for appearances, and women became the true breadwinners of their families, turning to the gray market and smuggling. Out of this, a new social class was born, entrepreneurs, or the donju, who found their way into the system and provided the regime with foreign currency. To secure the loyalty of the military, Kim Jong-il declared the Army First policy. Loyalty was bought with food rations and privileges. The nuclear program became his personal insurance against a Gaddafi scenario. North Korea would not be the first to use nuclear weapons, but simply having missiles capable of reaching the U.S. deterred Washington from interference. For domestic propaganda, it was proof of the country's strength and the leader's wisdom. Thus, the Kim dynasty maintained power through three main tools. The first, propaganda, constantly repeating the narrative of wise leaders in a hostile world. The second, the military, granted special rights and resources. The third, the donju, the masters of money. Top officials, military leaders, state company managers, and entrepreneurial women. They earned hard currency, did business abroad, spent dollars, and lived far better than ordinary citizens. For them, the regime was the guarantor of prosperity, and for the Kims, a source of funding. Even state companies like Air Koryo operated as hybrids of business and government. Officially considered the worst airline in the world, inside North Korea, it controlled assets ranging from airlines to taxis, gas stations, and cigarette production, regularly funneling a share of profits to the Kim family. Meanwhile, the leader himself lived hidden in a network of 33 residences with private train stations and underground tunnels, turning the country into a fortress where the fatalism of the people and the interests of the elite met at one point, the eternal rule of the dynasty. Here is a truth rarely shown. North Korea is one of the most closed and repressive systems in the modern world. Leaving the country without permission is treated as treason. Even domestic travel is only possible with special passes. There is no freedom of speech. All media is state-controlled. All men are required to serve in the army for 10 years. As of 2024, around 300,000 political prisoners are held in camps where forced labor, torture, and extrajudicial executions are the norm. Families are punished for wrong religious items or foreign materials, and simply watching foreign media can result in long prison sentences. One notorious case highlighted by the U.S. State Department revealed that in 2009, a 2-year-old child was sentenced to life imprisonment after authorities discovered a Bible, an illegal foreign item, in his parents' possession. For decades, all foreign media and outside content have been strictly banned in North Korea, with penalties ranging from life imprisonment to death. North Korea remains one of only 4 countries in the world that still regularly conducts public executions of prisoners. The others are Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Somalia. Geography also contributes to the country's isolation. To the east lies the Sea of Japan, and to the west, the Yellow Sea. Escaping by sea is extremely difficult. Boats are scarce, and the North Korean Navy regularly patrols the coasts, especially near the south. Anyone who reaches South Korea is automatically granted citizenship there, a fact that alone creates enormous incentive to escape. But crossing directly into South Korea has almost always been impossible because of the demilitarized zone, which stretches across the entire southern border. Despite its name, it is the most militarized border in the world, guarded by about 750,000 North Korean soldiers, 450,000 South Korean troops, and another 20,000 American soldiers, fortified with walls, fences, barbed wire, and around 2 million landmines. North Korean border guards have standing orders to shoot to kill at any attempted crossing. Over 35 years, from 1990 to 2025, the total number of defectors reaching South Korea has amounted to only about 34,350 people. Historically, the relatively easier escape route was northward. The border with China stretches more than 1,300 kilometers along the Yalu and Tumen rivers, through mountains and forests, while with Russia, it is just about 17 kilometers. Relations with both countries have generally been stable, so there was no need for heavy troop deployment. However, despite this porous border, escapees were left vulnerable. Both China and Russia have deportation agreements with Pyongyang, sending them back to North Korea, where imprisonment or execution awaited. Most North Koreans who crossed into China or Russia never intended to stay there. Their goal was to reach one of the few safe countries. Myanmar and Laos were excluded, as they, like China and Russia, deported North Koreans back. The real options were Mongolia, Thailand, or Vietnam. In those countries, based on arrangements with Seoul, captured North Koreans would be deported to South Korea. Thus, the escape plan was clear: cross the mountainous border into China, make the long journey to one of these states, surrender to local authorities, and then fly to Seoul to begin a new life. With the onset of the pandemic, the number of escapes collapsed by an order of magnitude. Before 2020, up to 2,000 people could flee across the northern border during the January-March period when the rivers were still frozen, but now the number barely reaches 50. Against this backdrop, the cost of guides skyrocketed. Before the pandemic, their services cost up to $16,000, while afterward the minimum rose to about $21,000. For most North Koreans, these amounts are completely unattainable. Already in January, just 2 months after the first reports of COVID-19 in China, North Korea became the first country in the world to completely shut and seal its borders. Movement was halted, international flights canceled, and almost all foreign trade stopped, with authorities declaring they would prevent the virus from entering the country at any cost. At first glance, the paranoia seems understandable. By some estimates, about 42% of the population is undernourished, one of the highest rates in the world, and malnourished people are more vulnerable vulnerable to severe outcomes from COVID-19. North Korea officially acknowledged its first case only on May 12, 2022, and by August had already declared victory over the virus, reporting just 74 COVID-related deaths. The reality was almost certainly worse. Anonymous sources told the BBC that during the 2022 outbreak in Pyongyang, about 1 in every 550 residents may have died. If extrapolated cautiously to the entire country, potential deaths could have reached around 45,000, orders of magnitude higher than the official 74. Be that as it may, the regime, while likely genuinely fearful of the epidemic, also used it as a convenient pretext to seal off society completely. In August 2020, buffer zones were established along the northern borders with China and Russia, and patrols were given strict orders to shoot on sight anyone attempting to cross without authorization, orders that appear to still be in effect 3 years later. Under the guise of anti-COVID protection, massive fortifications were built along the entire northern border. Satellite images show hundreds of kilometers of new walls, fences, barbed wire, and guard posts. Historic mountain passes and trails that for decades had been used by defectors and smugglers were blocked. What was once a porous northern border has effectively become a solid wall. Almost no one and nothing crosses it anymore, and costs and risks have risen so high that for the overwhelming majority, the path out has simply vanished. Today's North Korea is a paradoxical mix of poverty, ostentatious luxury, and high technology in service of a totalitarian regime. In late 2011, the supreme leader, who had ruled since 1994, suddenly died and power passed to his son, Kim Jong-un. Since then, he has relentlessly tightened control, both against defections and against smuggling. Born in 1982, Kim Jong-un was old enough to remember the collapse of the USSR and Eastern Europe, and having been educated in Switzerland, he understood Western values and their weaknesses. In 2018, Donald Trump offered Kim billions in investment and the prospect of a second Miami under the China-Vietnam model, capitalism under party control. But Kim already had everything he wanted: personal luxury, a network of residences, and most importantly, a nuclear shield guaranteeing his personal safety. The regime's showcase projects include the Wonsan Kalma Resort on the East Coast with hotels, beaches, and a water park, as well as the Moscow-Pyongyang Railway, launched in summer 2025, a gesture of connectivity with the outside world and a demonstration of political weight. Yet even this openness is tightly controlled. Foreigners are rarely admitted, kept under constant surveillance, and guided only along pre-approved routes. A telling example is the case of Otto Warmbier, an American student arrested in 2016 for attempting to steal a propaganda poster from his hotel. He was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor in a camp, returned to the U.S. a year later in a coma without explanation, and soon died. Meanwhile, the regime has never lagged behind in cyber warfare. While its domestic economy remains one of the most closed in the world, North Korean hackers actively earn hard currency abroad. As early as Kim's first years in power, Seoul recorded 150 million attempted cyber attacks per hour, and between 2016 and 2018, groups like Lazarus and Kimseki stole more than $1 billion from global crypto exchanges, including the high-profile Bybit hack, around $1.5 billion. These funds, along with new resorts and railway projects, bypass sanctions to sustain North Korea's weapons programs and ensure the Kim dynasty's survival. But cyber warfare is only one part of the strategy. All of this fits into Kim Jong-un's long-standing plan to turn the country into a truly closed digital state, where both digital and physical spheres are sealed off from the world. Only state-approved phones may legally be owned. They do not connect to the internet, cannot make calls abroad, and run on the Red Star operating system with unremovable software blocking any foreign files, apps, videos, audio, or texts. These devices even randomly take screenshots of activity. They cannot be deleted, and police are required to check them. In the past, smuggled foreign phones entering through the northern border were a lifeline to the outside world and a source of forbidden content for which families paid dearly. Now, with borders slammed shut and laws tightened, that entire underground infrastructure has been destroyed, along with the last cracks in the country's digital isolation. North Korea remains at the bottom of global rankings, but continues to play a role that cannot be ignored. The Kim dynasty eliminated rivals, built its own ideology, secured a nuclear shield, and surrounded itself with a narrow circle of people dependent on the regime. Unlike Deng Xiaoping's formula, let a few get rich first, Pyongyang follows the opposite principle. Only a select few may prosper, never everyone. The elites are told that without the leader, they will lose their privileges, while the poor are given just enough enough to survive but never rise. Since 2020, the country has effectively turned into a black hole. Exits are nearly closed, entries blocked. Geography, ruthless enforcement of laws, fortifications, and new digital barriers seal it off from the outside world more tightly than ever before. Together, this balance of fear and isolation makes the system astonishingly resilient, even in a world where such regimes usually collapse quickly. Gary was right. Here we explore how the world works and the key events that shape our reality. Subscribe so you don't miss videos that not only inspire, but also help you think bigger and act smarter.